The 4th edition D&D Dungeon Masters guide is kick-ass. Definitely better than the 2014 DMG, and it's not even close. So as I made a few videos advising people to pilfer parts of that book, I recently acquired the 4th edition DMG2. It's not quite as action-packed as the first one, and you can tell there are some filler parts to get it up to its full 224 pages. But there are still excellent rules you can steal and drop into your TTRPG games, so let's lather up and code ourselves in 5 more. First, let's talk about monster themes. The DMG2 talks about ways that you could flavor monsters by giving them different or extra abilities based on a shared theme. It's easier to explain this using an example, I guess. Let's say a powerful bandit warlord has taken over a region and recruited an army of kobolds, orcs, drow, and bugbears. And the warlord then outfits every one of those creatures with a shield bearing her crest, and also a pistol. So now each of those generic stat blocks gets an AC bump from the shield and also a new attack option because of the pistol. This would be a monster theme because you've essentially created several new, custom monsters. Or say you have a powerful mad scientist beholder who's been experimenting on the local creatures, and so many of the area goblins and ogres have eye stalks that can do various beholder-like attacks. Not only does this make combat more fun, but now you've created an adventure hook. Your players will definitely think something is up when they fight a group of mutated goblins, then later fight an ogre with that same mutation. Next, let's talk about encounter objectives. Too often D&D combat can become a slog when monsters become bags of hit points and everyone knows how the fight is going to end. The only question is how many rounds it will take to get there. So encounter objectives add some flavor mainly by giving both PCs and baddies alternate things to do on their turn. Here are what the book lists as options: make peace, retrieve an object, sneak in, and stop a ritual. Make peace means the characters must convince the members or leader of an opposing group that the two groups should work together. This is an objective that would usually begin before initiative is rolled. The main tension here is that combat doesn't have to break out, or if it does, it should be stopped as soon as possible. An example scenario here is when your murder hobo party accidentally kills someone they thought was an enemy, but actually belongs to a group important to the PC's plans. Oops. Now they have to talk their way out of a bigger conflict. The definition of retrieve an object is reach and secure an object in the encounter area. This is all sorts of applications. A common one I've used before is there's some kind of alarm system in the room, and the characters have to reach or stop the baddies from reaching that alarm device, or risk facing a much larger encounter. Or a heist situation where the PCs are trying to grab the diamond necklace and skedaddle while enemy arrows are raining down. The sneak-in type is defined as reach a destination or kill all the defenders without raising an alarm. Very similar to the example I gave of stopping the baddies from hitting the alarm button. But this sneak-in type of encounter is well suited to skill challenges, I think. A certain number of stealth, perception, and maybe sleight of hand checks to move through a facility while keeping a low profile. And the threat of combat would always be around the corner. Finally, stop a ritual is defined as interrupt a ritual before the enemy completes it, which is pretty on the nose. This is the scenario where the trio of mages are in the back of the room waving their hands around to summon some terrible demon, while a group of orcs or whatever are lined up in front of them, keeping the PCs away. If you have enough prep time, then building a specific objective into an encounter can give it new dimensions. Your players will appreciate the variety. And variety is the spice of life, no? Our third rule to steal is from a teeny sidebar on keeping antagonists alive. We all know that there are advantages to making sure your players are familiar with the BBEG. I learned this the first time I ever ran the original Lost Mine of Phandelver when the PCs finally met the Black Spider and were like, who are you? The EG cannot be a BB unless the party has strong feelings about that BBEG. So you want to put that baddie in front of the party so they can develop an intense hatred to make the later payoff of the final battle so satisfying. So how do you keep your antagonist alive? Because that level 2 party might get lucky with a few crits and take out your baddie, spoiling all your carefully laid plans. Maybe you're fine with that, or maybe you want to make sure your BBEG isn't destroyed too early. This book offers a few suggestions. One is to use introductory scenes where the baddie's villainy isn't yet apparent, or to use interaction scenes where the PCs can't fight the villain for some reason. Think of every James Bond movie ever where Bond first meets the main villain at a black tie event or something similar to that. You can also give the party a strong reason to keep the villain alive, like he's the only one who knows where the hostages are, or he has the passcode to the ultimate weapon. So the party has to do something else before they can fight him. It's safe to assume that if you put the main villain directly in front of the party, there's a good chance they'll try to fight, so be prepared for that. Have the villain be so powerful that she's unconcerned with low-level attacks and simply laughs them off. It's also helpful to make sure your BBEG has some kind of escape contingency plan, like a teleport spell or at the very least Misty Step. Our next idea to steal is avoiding trap cliches. Traps can be a fun part of TTRPGs because they're often like puzzles but with a lot more danger attached. But you have to take care for the traps to make sense in the world. So avoid overused and nonsensical things like traps without cause, repeated traps, traps without countermeasures, and overly punishing traps. I've combined and omitted a few from the actual list of the book here, but let me explain these. Traps without cause are traps that serve no logical purpose. Why is there a spike pit in this particular jungle? Is it designed to catch prey for food or to protect the entrance to a hideout? Repeated traps are when you use the same trap mechanism too many times, like a poison dart on every single chest in the dungeon. Players begin to expect it, always look for it, so you rob the trap of surprise. Traps without countermeasures are traps with no preventative solution. PCs should always have some means of detecting and disabling the trap, otherwise it feels unfair. It's entrapment. Get it? Especially if the party has a rogue with excellent investigation skills. Sure, you can at times put in well-hidden traps that have very high DCs, but if they're all like that, you rob the rogue of doing their cool thing. And if the players declare that they are moving slowly and carefully through a dungeon, reflect that in the DCs or give them advantage on checks. Finally, overly punishing traps should be obvious. Don't ever put your level 2 party up against a trap that does 12d8 poison damage. Don't do gotchas, that's just mean. Last on our list is organization elements. This is simply a checklist for how to create a faction in your campaign world. It's a good time saver and make sure you're thinking of all the facets that go into creating a well-rounded club. This list is rather long, so I wouldn't spend the time for every single faction in your campaign, but if a club starts to become prominent, it's maybe worth the effort. The list is goal, stated goal, size, alignment, philosophy, history, leadership, headquarters, membership requirements, structure, activities, enemies, rivals, factions, and other features. I know, it's a lot. I probably wouldn't fill out every single one of these things for every single organization, even the big ones. And I'm not going to go over each of these in detail now, because you all know I like to keep these videos short. But let me talk here about a few things. The difference between the goal and the stated goal is if the organization is up to something they don't want publicly known, such as a stated goal of stamping out the illegal drug trade, but the actual goal is squashing rival cartels, so the organization will be the only game in town. Membership requirements are especially useful if you think someone in the party might be interested, such as a thieves guild for your rogue, or some holy order for your cleric or paladin. Activities is useful to consider because if the club has goals, then they must be taking action to work toward those goals. What does the group do with their time? How do they spend their members' labor? Finally, think about factions, or what I would consider actually sub-factions within this org. Inside just about any group of size, there's going to be a contingent who thinks that the current leadership should be deposed. Having a subversive element within an organization is a fantastic way to present the organization to your players as a complex, living thing. It gives your players more choices, and in a game about making choices, I think that's a smart idea. So there we have 5 more rules from the DMG2 to steal and harness into powerful weapons of fun in your campaign. Shoot your shot, kid. Until next time, this is GM Jim. Now go out there and have some fun.